If you are gonna buy a house in Arizona, I highly recommend you watch this video. I'm Bridget Baldwin, team lead of the Tucson agents at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Arizona Properties, and I'm gonna run you through what it's like to buy a house in Arizona. The first step if you're looking to buy a house in Arizona is to figure out how much you can afford. You can do this one of two ways. The first way is by finding a lender or a banking institution and throwing an application in and seeing what it comes back with. They'll give you a max purchase price and then you can budget from there based on monthly payment. The second way is to take a look at all of your bank accounts and see how much cash you have in the bank, and that's how much money you have to buy a house. You can also ask someone who has a lot of cash if they'd be willing to give it to you. Worst thing they could say is no. Once you determine how much you're going to spend on housing, which should, as a rule of thumb, be less than 30% of your monthly income, then you start shopping. Can you buy a house by yourself in Arizona unrepresented? Yes. But I'm gonna tell you all of the things that a real estate agent will do for you during the transaction to help protect your best interests, and then you can decide from there what you wanna do. How do you find a realtor to work with? Most people find their agents through other people that they've represented. So word of mouth is huge in the real estate community. So just start asking people that you know are homeowners who they worked with and if they liked what they did. There's a few questions I would ask a licensed realtor or real estate professional to determine whether or not they're a good fit for you. Number one is, how many transactions have they closed in the last 6 months? How many in the last year? You want someone that's relevant enough in the current market, but also has the transactional experience to back it up. An agent could be licensed for 30 years and have sold 10 houses in the last 5 years. So make sure you ask them not how long they've been licensed, but how many transactions they've actually closed in the last year. Number two, I would ask them about their preferred method of communication. Are they a texter? Are they a caller? Do they send a carrier pigeon? Do they write love letters in the mail? You wanna make sure that your communication style matches their communication style, and if it doesn't, that they're willing and able to accommodate your needs. Number three, are they an agent that works the area that you wish to live in? Some agents cover the map, other agents specialize in different neighborhoods. Sometimes you wanna work with that specialist, and sometimes you don't. So just ask them, hey, I'm looking in Bump. Do you drive to Bump? And if they don't, maybe you should hire a different agent. So once you choose your agent, what you can expect is for them to start sending you listings that fit your criteria. But how do they know your criteria? You have to tell them. So make sure you have a sit down with them and explain to them, here are my needs and here are my wants. I need 4 bedrooms. I want a pool. So we can tailor our searches to fit what it is that you absolutely need, and then try to get that, sprinkle on top if we can. Once we start sending you those listings, you'll start giving us feedback. Ooh, love that, wanna see it. No, don't like that area. Whatever it is, feedback is everything. We can read minds, but not all the time. So let us know. It's not gonna hurt our feelings. It's not my grandma's house. This is a house that's being offered to the public. I might represent it, you'll know, or I might not. Be completely frank, upfront, and honest. You will not hurt our feelings, at least not mine. The next step is opening those doors. So the ones that you liked, that you were interested in seeing, your agent will have access to either through a lockbox or meeting with the listing agent. You'll schedule a time that works for the both of you, but more importantly you, and go check it out. Photos can only say so much, so make sure that if you are physically able to see that home in person, smell it, touch it, you can get in there and experience what it would be like to live in that home. There's a feeling that you get, trust me, once you get it, you get it. You'll wanna look and see what's across the street, what's over the neighbor's wall. Are you being bombarded by 5 huskies that can jump 8 feet in the air? If you like that sort of thing, then move right in. If that's not your thing, recognize that you can't control that. If you aren't physically in the town that you're looking to purchase a home in, some agents do offer virtual showings. So you can, FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or whatever and walk through that house as if you are on property. I would recommend, however, planning at least one travel visit during your inspection period, which we'll get to later, to determine whether or not this actually is the home for you. So once you find a house, then what happens? You will put pen to paper or type to screen and write up an offer. If you're representing yourself, you're going to have to navigate that a lot differently than if you have an agent. If you have a licensed realtor, you have access to the Arizona Association of Realtors purchase contract. Residential or commercial, depends on what you're purchasing, but let's go residential. So we have a purchase contract that your agent will fill out for you to sign and review. This will cover not only the purchase price, but all of the terms that you're offering the seller in order to purchase their home. For instance, what your down payment will be, what your earnest money deposit will be, when your close date will be, how long your inspection period. There are so many terms in there. It's very important you go through each and every one with your agent and fully understand what it is that you're asking for and what you're expecting in return. Once that offer is accepted by the seller, which could take a few counter offers or maybe even cancellations and comeback togethers, you will start scheduling your inspections. If you represent yourself, best of luck to you. If you have a real estate professional in your corner, it's going to be a lot simpler. What your agent will do is provide you with a couple of recommendations, preferably before you go under contract so you have time to research them and get familiar with who you're comfortable with. But we're talking general home inspector, roof inspector, termite and pest inspector, and sewer scope inspector. So that's usually a licensed plumber. There are some other ancillary inspections that you can go into. I personally and professionally recommend going into those if they come up on the general home inspection, such as an HVAC inspection. I will add, if you have a pool and spa, you're gonna wanna add that into your general or get yourself a separate. The Arizona contract currently has a standard inspection period of 10 days. If you choose to shorten that to improve the chances of your offer getting accepted by the seller, if you're in a competitive situation, great. Just make sure your agent is on top of scheduling all those inspections before that period ends. If you have a special circumstance where you're traveling from out of state, or it's a very complex property with solar and septic and other elements involved, or it's a very large property, maybe you have a 12-day inspection period. Either way, make sure your agent is paying attention to those timelines, because once that inspection period's over, your earnest money goes non-refundable. And earnest money is typically at least 1% of the purchase price if you're financing, sometimes up to 10% if you're paying cash. So it can be a lot of money. So once your inspections are complete and you get through that painful process of tearing your brand new home that you love so much apart, you're going to compile a list of concerns. I recommend focusing on your deal breakers, but use the rest as a checklist. As a homeowner, you're going to have some work that needs to be done or some things that need to be routinely checked up on, and knowing what to expect from the home inspection is going to be your best friend in the long run. If there are some non-negotiables that come up, your agent is going to put them on a form called the BINSR, which is the Buyer Inspection and Notice to Seller Response, and it's due at the end of your inspection period, or once it's delivered, your inspection period is over. So if you have 10 days to inspect and you send that BINSR on day 5, you don't have 5 more days. So be sure you're sure when you send that BINSR over. It starts a whole new clock. You send the BINSR over with your requests. I want the roof fixed. I want the plumbing fixed. Whatever it is, you're gonna send that over. Once that form is sent, the seller has 5 days to respond. This allows the seller to conduct any personal inspections they'd like, any bids or estimates they'd like to gather, or just to sit and think about it over a glass of wine. If they don't respond after the 5 days, you get nothing. It's as though they're not agreeing to anything. That's what the contract defaults to. Anything can be revived using addendums, but I just want people to know if they don't respond, it defaults to them not doing anything. So you as a buyer have to be prepared to cancel or move forward as is. If the seller does respond, however, there's 3 options. They can either agree to everything you asked for, yay. They can say no to everything you asked for, or they can do a partial agreement or some kind of credit where they aren't necessarily doing the repairs, but they're giving you the money to do them later if you want. Once that response is received by you as the buyer, now you have 5 days to decide whether or not you're going to move forward. If they agreed to everything, then you're done. You're moving forward, obviously. But if they've only agreed to a portion of the repairs or if they've declined everything, you still have a chance for 5 days to sit and think about it, conduct your own research again, find new estimates that might save you some money in the long run before you can either cancel or move forward. There's no renegotiation. That's why this time period is so important to focus on your non-negotiables. Next up is the appraisal process. That's if there's an appraisal required for the contract. And there's plenty of reasons why an appraisal wouldn't be required, but let's just talk about the contracts that do require an appraisal. So an appraisal is necessary for a lender to verify that what they are lending on is worth what the buyer is paying. So basically, if the lender's saying, here's 500 grand and the house is only worth 400, they might be $100,000 short if the buyer decides one day to stop making their payments and the lender is stuck with the house. An appraiser is considered a neutral third party that comes to the table and says, all right guys, y'all aren't crazy. What the buyer wants to pay and what the seller wants to sell for is supported by the market. That's it. Very critical time for the buyer's interest to be protected. Little shaky time for the seller if that appraisal comes in low. So there's plenty of situations, again, where if the appraisal comes in low, there's the buyer's willingness to come to the table with the excess funds on top of their down payment at closing. That's a story for another time. But let's just say the appraisal comes in low and there's no agreement for the buyer to come up with the deficit. What happens? The lender now can't give that loan to the buyer because the house isn't worth what the buyer's paying for. So there's 3 options. The buyer can decide to scrape up as much change as they can and throw it at the seller in order to satisfy that deficit and meet the purchase price that's on the contract that both parties signed. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is for the buyer to walk away because they realized they were about to overpay, and that would allow them to receive their earnest money back. It's in the contract. There is a certain amount of time though that needs to be done, and it's within 5 days of receiving that appraisal. So again, just make sure if you're not representing yourself, have your licensed real estate professional there to protect your best interests and pay attention to all of these critical deadlines. And thirdly, the seller has the final option to reduce the contract price down to meet the appraised price in order for the transaction to go through. I will say this is most common just because the seller knows that any other buyer that comes in with financing, they're probably going to run into the same thing unless the appraiser is way off, which I digress, but the listing agent can also appeal this appraisal to see if they can get it higher. That happens too. The seller knows and accepts that the house is worth what it's worth and is just happy to get to the end rather than go back on the market and try to find a new buyer. An appraisal is one of the very few upfront costs to a buyer during a transaction. Aside from inspections, which are paid for and non-refundable, there's the earnest money deposit that is paid for upfront but refunded either in the form of credit toward the down payment at closing or refunded completely if the deal falls through within the terms of the contract. With the appraisal being an upfront cost, you want to make sure that you're moving forward with that transaction before you order it, unless you're in a competitive situation where you have to close quickly, which you can ask your lender about. Most buyers choose to order the appraisal once they're through at least the inspection portion and they know they're going to be moving forward pretty much no matter what. An appraisal can take between 7 and 10 days to be returned to the lender once ordered. So it's really important, again, that your real estate professional is on board with the timelines and making sure that that appraisal is ordered in a timely manner to protect your best interests. If you don't close on time, you lose your earnest money unless you have a gracious seller that's allowing an addendum to extend it. But a promise is a promise. The contract date is the contract date, black and white. Next step, the appraisal is done, the price is met and all conditions are good. You are going to conduct a final walkthrough of the property to make sure that it is in the same or better condition than it was when you wrote the contract. What does that mean? That means if you're sitting in front of a white wall and all of a sudden you walk in and it's pink, you want that painted back to white. Maybe you don't. Maybe you consider that better than when you found it. But either way, you're looking for roof leaks. You're looking to make sure that they didn't rip the TV brackets off the walls or that they didn't pull the ceiling fans out of the ceiling. You want to make sure that they didn't replace the refrigerator with something janky. Essentially, the final walkthrough is for you to ensure that you are getting what you paid for, that you are getting what you agreed to, and any future agreements that were made during the contract transaction that they are being met as well. Your agent will meet you at the property and walk you through with the paperwork, ensuring that everything that was agreed upon that's being left is there, all the repairs are done. These repairs need to be done contractually at least 3 days prior to close of escrow. So I suggest scheduling your final walkthrough as close to closing as possible, but also with enough time to allow for these repairs to be made without delaying closing. So then once the final walkthrough is done, if you have any requests that would hold up closing, you're going to have your agent fill out what's called the final walkthrough form, and it will indicate what you need done, and it must be done within 3 days of the delivery of that form. Closing is a super exciting time where there's just a lot of paperwork being shuffled back and forth between the lender and the title company to make sure that the closing disclosure is balanced. The closing disclosure is a document at title, at closing, that highlights all of the debits taken from the buyer and all of the credits given to the seller, and vice versa. If the buyer is receiving any credits from the seller and the seller is debiting money toward the buyer, those will be highlighted in the column as well. Once you have a copy of that closing disclosure, make sure that you are checking every line item, that any credit that was promised to you by the seller in writing is on that closing disclosure. If there are any fees that are paid out of pocket from you to your agent, make sure that you understand those fees as well. So now, once all the paperwork is done and balanced between the lender and the title company, they schedule your signing appointment. Great, you get keys, right? No, you don't get keys at that point. You get keys in Arizona once the property records with the county. And what does that mean? So in other states, the signing appointment is when the keys are delivered, and recording happens at some other time. I'm not super familiar about it. I refer to my colleagues for that. But in Arizona, you're gonna bring a form of ID and your enthusiasm for signing your name 200 times. Once all the paperwork is signed, you'll get a copy and it will be sent to the county by title to be recorded. What does that mean? It means it's legally recorded with the county and the house is officially yours. And at that point, your agent is going to meet with you, most likely at the property, and hand over those keys in that moment that everyone has been waiting for. Our job as licensed real estate professionals does not end there, at least not for me and my team. We're there for anything that you need after the fact. And trust me, owning a home comes with a lot of questions and a lot of unknowns. So don't be afraid. You'll have the support of us. Just reach out on anything. If there's mail that's coming from the previous owner, let us know. We'll figure out how to get that out of your hands. They get jury duty notice, you're gonna wanna get that to them. If you don't know how to operate something, or you need guidance on a pet-friendly patio to go have a beer after work, we are your people. We're going to be there for you forever. Real estate is a relationships business. And so the only way that we thrive is by positive reviews from the people that we've worked so hard to satisfy. If you feel satisfied with your agent's service, go online to their Google business page or wherever else they post their reviews and testimonials and give them a 5-star review. Tell a detailed account of your experience with them and specific reasons why you loved working with them. Whether it was their friendly demeanor, their sense of humor, their diligence, their great communication, whatever it was that made them them, put that out there for the public to see so that they can attract more of the same. If you were unsatisfied with your agent's performance in any way, go to them directly. We need the feedback in order to make the industry a better place. So rather than smearing them online, go directly to them and give them the opportunity to make it right for you. Once you've purchased a house, talk to your CPA, But make sure that before you file your taxes for that previous fiscal year, that you have a copy of your closing disclosure, that final settlement statement from the title company that you took with you that day, or ask your agent for a copy of it to include in your taxes for those possible benefits once you talk to your CPA. I am not a CPA. Disclaimer, cannot give tax advice. I like to make a habit personally and professionally to send all of the closing statements out to my people in January of that following year, just to get ahead of it. So maybe nudge your agent on that idea too. From there, enjoy, live, laugh, love, and pay attention to your equity. Have your agent check in with you, maybe quarterly, maybe annually, whatever is best for you and your circumstances. But it's great to know as a homeowner just how much your home is worth. And sure, there's plenty of home finding websites that will tell you what they think your house is worth, but that's an algorithm. And really, you need that licensed professional's opinion to let you know what your home is truly worth.